at doing government legislative affairs for the Alaska Airmen's Association. And it looks like we got some Instagram, and Facebook may be having a little bit of trouble with keeping connected. So just a few quick things here before we get too deep into this. I am having to use the cell network for this. I am at home. Actually, I'm at the airport in my hometown here in Nenana. And so in order to be able to get enough bandwidth, I'm having to use the cell signal to be able to do this tonight. So apologize ahead of time if things kind of drop in and out. From time to time, hopefully the bandwidth will hold up. So it looks like we've got a few people starting to join us now, both on Facebook and on Instagram. So it's nice to see some of you out there, recognize some of the names that are popping up. So glad that folks are joining us tonight. Just a general overview. I've been getting a lot of questions here the past week or so. The coronavirus has been, just making a mess of things all over the world, and it's here in Alaska now. And so we've got some things to be worried about, to be able to make sure that we are being responsible citizens, that we're doing things that are not going to endanger our family and friends and our neighbors. And so because of that, there have been some mandates that have come down, not just from the federal level, but state level, and even to a certain extent to the local level, to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent and slow the spread of the virus as it's making its way actually truly around the world now. So what do a lot of these mandates mean? What does it take for us to still do the things that we need to do for aviation? Alaska being a very aviation-centric state where we don't have a lot of roads, aviation definitely is the way that we have to get goods and services and people moved around the state. Makes things hard. It really, really does. So tonight what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about some of these things that I've been able to keep track of, some of the issues that have been coming to me. First of all, I appreciate the emails and the phone calls that a lot of you are doing, asking me questions, letting me know what's going on. You are my eyes and ears. I do get around the state in normal times. I get around the state quite a bit. I'm pretty well connected when it comes to knowing what's happening at the federal and state level. But as all of us are staying home a whole lot more, working from home, and as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, I'm actually in my hangar right now, set up a remote studio to be able to do this tonight. It's a little engineering here to get both of these cell phones working. But I do appreciate people coming in and letting me know via email and text and phone calls what's going on and the impacts that you're seeing. So I appreciate that. Please keep them coming. Like I said, you are my eyes and ears out there to know what's happening. I guess with that, we'll go ahead and go through some of the things that I have on my list that I've been dealing with several of you out there to be able to know what these impacts mean. Probably the three most important health mandates that have been issued by the state of Alaska through the governor's office, Commissioner Crum with the Department of Health and Social Services, Dr. Zink. Those are familiar names to us now here in Alaska. Fortunately, for most of us, we never knew who those people were before this happened, but the governor's office has been doing a very good job of having press conferences every day and some live times back and forth to be able to give folks information and timely information. So there's been some health mandates that have come down, not just at the local level, but at the state level. And so health mandates 11 and 12, 10, 11, and 12 are probably the biggest ones that we need to address tonight. Some of these things have happened, like I said, at the local level before the statewide level hit. And so what does this mean for us? Well, if we go back and look, health mandate number 10 is talking about interstate travel, meaning coming outside of Alaska to Alaska, and the 14-day mandatory self-isolation that's been put in place for people coming into the state. Now, there are some exemptions to that. But for the most part, there is a 14-day self-isolation that needs to happen there. One of the questions that I raised pretty early on, was able to pass that on to some contacts, and apparently I wasn't the only one wondering about this. But what do we do if we fly into Alaska in our own personal aircraft? You know, Alaska Airlines and the other major airlines are not the only ones coming into the state. And so the form that is to be filled out by all arriving passengers and people into the state is now available via email. That form is a PDF now on the internet, on the state's Department of Health and Social Services website, and then you can email that form so that you can comply with health mandate number 10. Now, health mandate number 11 is dealing with social distancing, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with these health mandates, you really need to be. And there is places on the web, if you just do a search for Alaska Corona health mandates, it comes up pretty quick. And it's Department of Health and Social Services website. So looks like we may be having a little bit of problem with some of the audio, and again, I apologize for that. I'm having to use the cell signal, and here in Nenana, we are fortunate to even have cell service from time to time, but looks like some people are having a little trouble with that audio and others are not. So apologize for that. But health mandate number 11 is talking about social distancing. That's where the 6-foot rule has come out, no groups of 10 or more, those things that we've all heard about. The governor has even mentioned, and Dr. Zink have mentioned in their press conferences about outdoor activities are still acceptable, and being able to walk and hike and bicycle, run. Now, fishing and hunting, there's some back and forth on that right now. They actually have closed the bear season, but now there's some talk that that may change. We'll have to wait and see. All of this is very, very fluid and changes from day to day. But you need to maintain a distance of 6 feet or more between individuals that are not part of your household. Now, what does that mean for us in aviation? Well, unless you've got a really big airplane, it's hard to keep 6 feet away from someone else in your airplane. It's hard to keep 6 feet away when you're doing flight instruction. So a lot of these questions have come up. What does that mean? What can we do? What shouldn't we do? And so there's been some questions back and forth as what is essential. And we talk about essential services. We talk about critical infrastructure. All of these phrases now that are being used in our vocabulary that a month ago, maybe not so much. So there is a procedure to go through if you want to ask for an exemption to see if you would be considered critical infrastructure or essential personnel to still be able to go out and do some things that may contradict some of these health mandates. The other mandate that is a lot of concern for folks is Health Mandate 12, and we're going to talk more about what these actually mean here in just a bit. But that's intra-state travel. That means going from one location in the state to another. And so unless you are supporting critical infrastructure or for critical personal needs, you shouldn't be going anywhere in the state. Now, some villages have come up with some mandates of their own, not wanting their own residents to leave the village. And if they do, they're not welcome back for 30 days. And if you do come back, the folks in the village, there's a 30-day self-isolation that happens there in some villages. And so, again, all these things are very fluid. That's what is happening today. That could change tomorrow. As you know, last week there were a lot of changes that happened relatively quickly throughout the mandates and health advisories and things that were coming in. So a lot of folks have asked me, hey, can I go out to my cabin? What if I want to just go flying just for a sanity check? I need to get out of the house. Can I go do that? So this is where I kind of revert back to being a father and a dad of three daughters. Just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And so let me expound on that just a little bit. What's the reasons for these health mandates? Why has the governor come down with some of these? And why is there some changes in what these mandates are talking about? We just, Linda, you just mentioned that the governor's opened up bear season for residents now and not for non-residents. That wasn't the case yesterday. That's just changed in the past 24 hours. it may change again. And so you have to make sure that you're actually reading the most current information about these things. And it's changing. So just because you might be able to go out and do something according to what the health mandates talk about as far as the exemptions, and you've submitted a plan if it's part of your business to see if you're essential, you need to keep it current on that stuff. Now, can you go out, get in your airplane and go fly around the pattern, go on a little sightseeing trip with people in your immediate household? I think based on what the governor has said, now this is my interpretation, on what I've been reading and what I've been hearing and the information I've been given, that if you can go outside and you can walk and hike and bicycle, the governor's even said that you can go out for a drive. So it would stand to reason that the spirit of that is that you can get out and enjoy some physical activity. You can do things that you normally enjoy doing as long as you are self-isolating, no more than 6 feet away or no closer than 6 feet away. You're not doing it in groups of people. And if you can go get in your airplane and go flying around, that seems to be one of those areas that's probably okay. But here's what you need to think about. You're probably going to need to get fuel. Who else has touched that fuel pump? Are you going to have to interact with anybody else in order to get your airplane ready and then go flying as part of that whole process? And again, what is the reason for these health mandates? It's to make sure that the virus doesn't have an easy path to be transmitted. It's a very aggressive virus. It's very easy to be transmitted from person to person. And then there's all these conversations about how long does the virus live on particular surfaces and in what conditions and all these things. That's why these mandates are out there, is to try to protect the public. And while you may think that it's okay, who else is out there? Who is doing these things? Another consideration, if you've been involved in social media at all in the past few days, there was a search and rescue that was called out for some stranded hikers in the Anchorage area within the past week. That is one of the things that have been said that we can go out and do, but yet they needed help. They ran into a condition where they had to have some additional assistance. I can tell you from what people were acting and what they were being said on social media, the general public didn't think that was a good idea to put search and rescue assets at risk and using personal protective equipment that's very, very hard to come by these days, and pulling resources away from other things. So you need to consider what happens if you're out flying and you need search and rescue services. What does that mean? Normal times, yeah, it's bad. It's nice to have those people out there to do it. But is this really the time that we want to be taking a lot of these risks and a lot of these things? So again, just because you can, does that mean that you really should? That's the question that always was rolling through my mind with all these things. Now, some of the other impacts that we've had comes to some of the services that are available to us, some of them that we have grown so accustomed to having that we rarely even use these days because of other things available, as far as self-briefing for weather, following flight plans, and all those things now via our iPads and other technology. The FAA is trying to figure out what they're doing when it comes to facilities that have employees that have become sick with the virus. Some places in the lower 48, we've heard of control towers being shut down. We've heard of centers being shut down and having to shunt their traffic over to adjacent centers to be able to maintain and manage air traffic control. The phrase that has come up numerous times is ATC zero. If you do a search on the internet, ATC zero, the FAA has got policies and procedures in place if there is no air traffic control to manage the traffic. So thankfully here in Alaska, Anchorage has got some things in place for the Anchorage Bowl. You look at some of the FAA publications, they kind of give a status update. What's happening is a lot of controllers, a lot of flight service specialists are working multiple positions at the same time. And so if you're out flying and you make a radio call and nobody comes back, or they come back and say stand by, you need to understand that you are not the only person there working when it comes to air traffic control. So when it comes to getting in and out of the Anchorage Bowl, we've been told that touch and goes at Lake Hood they really don't want that to happen right now because they're overwhelmed with minimum staffing and trying to keep everything going in and out of international. But again, here's one of these things. Do you really need to be going out doing touch and goes right now? And we'll get to currency requirements and other things here in just a bit. So looking at my notes here just to make sure I'm staying on track. Flight standards. If you have any need to interact with flight standards when it comes to some maintenance issues or other certification type things, my understanding is that there are people that are still coming to the office. Most of the flight standard staff are working remotely from home now, so you need to call ahead. And most likely they're going to try to schedule something and work around trying to figure out how to do this. But you may be told that right now we just can't do that. You're going to have to call back later, or we're going to have to wait a week or so, or who knows. But you need to get in touch with them and work that out. In normal times, it wasn't good to just show up at flight standards. You needed to call and make an appointment anyway. So that policy is still in effect, is my understanding. But it's now more important than ever to go ahead and call ahead to find out what's going on. A lot of the weather products that we really enjoy and appreciate from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, they are having to remote some of those or hand off some of those products to other parts of the National Weather Service to be able to develop those products. And so you really, really need to check the valid times and the expiration times of that valid range, and check and see if those things are current. There was an announcement earlier this week, or actually end of last week, about products were not going to be updated past 9 p.m. So you need to make sure you check the valid times on those products from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. They're doing the best they can, trying to keep things going with minimal staffing. Again, just like every other industry, trying to work remote is difficult for some activities, not quite as difficult for others, but then trying to make sure that they are doing a good job of social distancing so they can stay healthy, so we can still have these products and services that we really need. So we talked about some of the flying around, and if you're in Anchorage, based out of Merrill Field, there's been a lot of back and forth here in the past week about flight training. And can you engage in flight training activities right now? And that decision has gone back and forth a couple times already. And so the way it currently stands, and I say currently, and heavy emphasis on currently, is that flight training is not permitted, is the interpretation that's come down. But the question now is, what about solo flight? We got some folks that were ready to take check rides that are trying to stay current so that when this whole thing goes away, which who knows how long that's going to take, they'll be ready to jump in and just take their check ride as if they were scheduled to do that last week. So we're trying to get some interpretation on that and see how that goes. Again, we need to go back and look at the intent of these health mandates. What are we trying to accomplish by social distancing? What are we trying to accomplish about limiting intrastate travel, going from one part of the state to another? And that critical infrastructure and critical personal needs, getting groceries, getting medications, and those things. This is not just to go out and travel around and do our normal springtime activities. We need to be careful what we're doing. Looking at medicals, if your medical expired in March, April, or May, or even June, the FAA has issued a statement that they will not bring enforcement action against anyone that has an expired medical during that time frame. So that's good news. I was talking with a medical examiner, a great friend of the Alaska Airmen's Association today, Dr. Illig, and she, I kind of pinged her and asked her what was going on and how things were happening there. And there's a lot of interesting things that are popping up because of this. Some folks are not able to get their flight physicals because their examiners are saying, this is not one of these essential medical procedures that are necessary, so we're not going to do those right now. Other folks have some waivers that they're trying to get some medical tests done so that they can get their special issuance back again, and there's running into some problems with that. Actually, some some foreign pilots that have U.S. FAA issued certificates and need some medical exams. They're concerned that if they fly internationally, just because the FAA says they're not going to take enforcement action, what is this foreign government going to do when they see that this U.S. registered pilot certificate doesn't have a flight physical to go along with it? So there's a lot of questions for that. The other big issue with medicals, just because the FAA has said that they're not going to take enforcement action, if you carry insurance on your aircraft, the FAA can't waive insurance requirements. That's outside their jurisdiction. So you need to talk to your insurance agent and find out if your insurance agency is going to allow you to continue to fly if you have an expired medical certificate. What I'm hearing is that medical certificate still has to be had in order for your insurance. Now, that may not be the case for everybody. I haven't heard of a case yet where they will allow you to continue to fly. If you've heard of those things, please let me know. Would love to be able to know who's doing that and what the conditions are for that. Again, there's a lot of things going on here that we're still not sure how it's going to play out. Biannual flight reviews. How are we going to do that? Kind of hard to keep that 6-foot social distancing when you're out flying around getting a biannual flight review, unless you have an immediate family member who lives in your household who's a flight instructor who can do that for you. So how's that going to work? I think biannual flight reviews are going to be hard to do right now. Check rides, we know check rides have been canceled left and right and center, all over the place. And so it seems like examiners are not willing to do check rides. So these are questions we're asking the FAA that we haven't been able to get a definitive answer on yet. They're working on it. They're trying to figure these things out just like we are. But my suspicion is, and I've got nothing to base this on other than suspicion based on how they handled the medical and other things, we're probably going to see something coming out down the road where we're going to be able to make up for some lost time here. There's going to be a little grace period, I think. Now, again, that's not definitive yet, and so we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But again, if you fly without a current biannual flight review, and the FAA might be okay with that, we're not sure, but does that mean your insurance is going to be okay with it? Probably not. So as is usually the case, insurance agencies tend to be a little more restrictive than what the FAA is. They have a little more financial stake in what you're doing. And so check with your insurance company before you do that. As far as maintenance on aircraft, there have been several ADs, airworthiness directives, that have been extended. There's actually a couple of them that I was just reading today. The FAA has extended the compliance period to perform some airworthiness directives on certain aircraft because folks just can't get it done in the time frame in the current situation we're dealing with. So speaking of maintenance issues, aircraft maintenance facilities have been considered essential. And I think that was a wise choice because, again, Alaska is so dependent on aviation. The 135s, the air taxis, and the airlines have to be able to fix their aircraft or they can't fly. And so those services have been deemed critical. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can get your airplane to the shop. One of the airplanes that I fly, actually the annual expires in April. I was scheduled to take it to the shop last week. It's still sitting here. I did not take it. They were willing to accept the aircraft to do the maintenance. My concern is that the governor had just issued the health mandates about unnecessary intra-state travel, and I didn't think it was worth me trying to get back from the Kenai, Soldotna area back home here in Nenana. So it's still sitting here in the hangar. Now I've got a month to figure this out, but if it lapses, it's easy to get a ferry permit. And my guess is that especially these times, you'll be able to get a ferry permit once this cleans up pretty easily, especially considering the circumstances. So looking now at some of the other questions that have come up, people are asking, well, what's the deal with these villages wanting to shut down travel and nobody coming in, nobody going out? They can't close the airport. And you're right, they're not closing the airports. State DOT has gone on record that none of the airports in Alaska are closed. They are still open up for business, but that doesn't mean that you should go, because we are specifically being asked to stay out of the villages for many, many reasons. Primarily is the lack of health care in a lot of these off-road system villages, and needing to keep the citizens and residents as healthy as we can, and not exposing them to the virus, because there's no health care to be able to take care of them and to be able to get them out of the villages. So please, out of respect for our neighbors, whether it's just down the road or down the river, although the airport may be open, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be going. We've been asked not to travel unnecessarily. So we've got some other concerns that are happening, this time of year, this winter. We actually had a normal winter when you look at the weather and you look at the charts. It was a normal winter, especially here in the interior. Normal amount of cold. We had a normal amount of snow, but it's been so long since we've had normal when it comes to a winter. It's been a hard one to deal with on a lot of fronts. But the Pacific Alaska River Forecast Center has issued their predictions as to what kind of breakup we're going to have. There's a strong likelihood we could have ice jam flooding in the rivers this spring. Because of the amount of snow and the cold that we've had, the ice, it's just going to be interesting to see how this goes. The National Weather Service has relied on pilots filing pilot reports as far as river ice conditions to make their predictions. And so we're trying to work through that issue right now. Actually, I was on the phone quite a bit with Tom George, the Alaska Regional Manager for AOPA, working through some of those issues together, trying to figure out how we can make some of this still happen. So be careful if you're trying to go somewhere. One of the things that's been said for the lower 48 is that it's not that big of a deal here in Alaska because we're kind of accustomed to this already. You may not be able to have the services you're accustomed to when you go to a larger village. Excuse me. If you were expecting to go out there, even if it is for critical, mission critical type activities, are you going to be able to buy the fuel that you normally would at the normal places in the normal ways to be able to get back? Those are things you need to be considering as you do this. So staffing is an issue all over the different industries here in the state. So those were some of the big things that I had on here. I've been seeing a lot of comments kind of popping up. And so it's good to see some of these things sitting here. And Doug, I'm trying to read your whole message here. There you go. Just because they're not going to bring enforcement action does not mean that you're still not in violation. It just means they're not going to take action. So that's absolutely correct. You're still not within the regs, but the FAA is kind of turning a blind eye to it for the current situation. The best thing I can equate it to, just because there's been other allowances and other things like they're not going to foreclose if you can't make your house note. Those types of things. That doesn't mean that you still don't owe your mortgage. They still want their money. It's the same thing with the FAA when it comes to these medicals right now. You're still going to have to get a medical as soon as you can, but they're not going to take enforcement action during this period. You're not going to be penalized if you were not able to get a medical during this time. Normally, just looking at the clock, I normally don't go this long on these updates. I've been doing one a month since January, and most likely I'll be doing them a little more frequently during this time to help address some of the questions that I've been getting and some of the concerns that a lot of you are bringing to me. So I don't know what that schedule is going to be. It's going to be kind of ad hoc. I might do one a week. We'll have to wait and see. But it is nice to be able to get out this information in a little more timely manner. Now, some folks have been asking, how do we see this content without having Facebook or Instagram? We do post the video up on our YouTube channel. I'm going to try our best to get that up for you tomorrow. I know several folks have reached out and said that they're not going to be able to see it on Instagram or Facebook. And if you have friends that are like that in that situation, let them know that we will be putting things up on our YouTube channel, and they can see this video that we're doing tonight. So just to quickly review some things. So here's the deal, just to kind of be blunt and wrap things up. Don't be stupid. don't be foolish. I know it's hard to work from home. I know it's hard not to have the social interaction that we've all come to take for granted. Alaskans are very independent. We like our space. We tend to be a little antisocial from time to time. We like to go out to the cabin. We like to be in the woods and be alone when it's on our terms. And now we're being told, stay at home, don't go out in public, don't be in groups of 10, stay 6 feet away from everybody. And there's something about Alaskans that we say, yeah, the government's telling me, and that means I don't like it. But this is not about you. This is about protecting your neighbor. This is about protecting the elderly down the street that is at higher risk if they do contract the virus. Just because you feel healthy and you don't think you've got any symptoms, that doesn't mean that you're not contagious. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be in danger to be able to still travel around. So this is not about you. This is about those around you. And again, think about what the mandates, what are they trying to accomplish? And consider that when you say, well, by the letter of the law, I can do this, but by the Spirit, are you still able to do what you're wanting to do? So what can you be doing in the meantime? This is a perfect time for you to sit there and review and go over and kind of do your own flight review. Now, granted, it's not going to be official. You're not going to be able to enter it into your logbook, but you can go online and do a lot of online safety courses. AOPA and their Air Safety Institute has a huge library of really, really good online courses that you can go and take, and they're all free. And you can sit there and spend an hour or spend 30 minutes going through a live or an interactive video Safety Institute program. Some of those are wings credit available, so you can get some wings credit for that. One of the things that I'm doing, my flight instructor certificate has to be renewed in June of this year. So I'm doing the 16 hours of required classroom time. I'm doing that over the internet and taking care of that during this time. One of the things I'm hoping that I can do, I'm considering going back and retaking the instrument ground school. It was, well, I'm going to tell on myself now. It was 1992 when I passed my instrument check ride. And, I still fly on instruments. I'm still instrument current. Try to stay proficient. But, probably wouldn't hurt me to go back and take the instrument ground school again. This is a great time to do that. You're still thinking, you're still doing aviation-related stuff. You're not out interacting with the public when you do that. So one of the other things that we're looking to do, the Alaska Airmen's Association, AOPA, the Alaska Aviation Safety Foundation, a lot of our industry partners here in the state, we are working together to try to figure out how to get through this. If you were watching some of the governor's press conferences, Commissioner Crum for the Department of Health and Social Services specifically mentioned the good work that the Alaska Air Carriers Association had been doing to get their members prepared and ready to meet some of these health mandates, to keep these airplanes flying to the villages with freight and mail and all that. So all the industry groups are working together, trying to figure out the best way forward, trying to do the things that we can to protect aviation. But please understand, while we are fighting for our ability to still operate and fly here in the state, sometimes it's best just to stay home. And just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should, is the thing I want everybody to remember. This is a very fluid situation. Things are changing day to day. If you keep track of the numbers across the world, across the nation, and here in Alaska, things are changing by the day. What is allowed today may not be the case tomorrow. So please pay attention to what these things are saying, the health mandates and the health alerts that are being issued by the state. Again, a phrase I want to keep saying over and over again. I feel like a dad dealing with my daughters here. Just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. One of the things I've heard said over and over by government officials throughout all of this, following the guidelines for the next 30 days is a matter of life and death. It may not be your life, but it's someone else's that could be in danger. So please be aware of that. please understand what the reasons for these health mandates are out there for. Want to just quickly kind of wrap things up and say that it really has bummed me out that we're not going to have the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering here in a month. I really look forward to that event. It is a fast-paced, exhausting weekend, but I love it. And obviously a lot of you out there enjoy it too. 20 to 25,000 people come through that facility during the weekend, but we've had to call it off. We just couldn't, with good conscience, make that event happen. And especially now that some of the further recommendations and mandates have come out, it's just impossible to do. Because of that, I mentioned some of the webinars and other things that we're looking to do with our industry partners here in the state. Some of the seminars and sessions that we were planning on having at the gathering, we will be doing them on the internet as webinars. So look for more information to come in the weeks ahead for that. So we'll be able to get that information out there. And I know a lot of folks are asking, but yes, we are still raffling off that Cessna 180. It is an incredible airplane. If you haven't seen the videos that's coming out of Above Alaska, Drew and Sarah are doing an excellent job, and their crew there at Above Alaska with refurbishing that airplane. It kind of makes me wish I wasn't an employee of the Airmen's Association, because I'm not eligible to win. So it's a great airplane. And if you haven't seen the pictures and the progress of that, look at our feeds here and see the progress on those airplanes. We are still selling tickets for that. And I'm going to put a shameless plug, and I'm just going to be out here in the open with it and blunt and honest. Because we're not having the gathering this year, the Airmen's budget is severely strained. The gathering was one of the large fundraisers for the association, and we're not able to have that. Some of the exhibitors have donated their registration fee and have not asked for a refund. Other exhibitors simply aren't able to afford to do that, and I totally get that. Times are tight. The transponder is getting ready to be sent out into your mailbox, and there's a list of exhibitors there. Please make an effort to thank those guys and gals for their involvement in the Airmen's Association. But because we are not able to have that event this year, we really, really need to sell out of the tickets for the raffle plane, because that's what's going to keep the Airmen's Association afloat. Going to keep us able to continue doing our programs, going to keep me able to be employed and be able to continue doing what I'm doing advocacy-wise, and the rest of the staff too. So that's a little bit of a shameless plug. I'm not embarrassed to say that. Please buy your tickets, and if you've already bought one, if you can afford to buy another one, please do that and tell all your friends. Call the office and you can buy your tickets over the phone. The rest of the office staff is working remotely. We got the phones forwarded to their cell phones, and they can log into the computer remotely and sell your tickets that way. So we still have some kiosks around the state, but again, asking folks not to travel around. So you may not be able to get to one of those places to purchase a ticket at a kiosk. So again, call the office to be able to buy your winning raffle ticket for the airplane this year. So again, I've gone a little bit longer than what I normally do, but I'm looking to do more of these here in the coming days if we have any changes or things that are going to impact our ability to go flying around. And you know, folks, this is not the way the world's going to be forever. We're going to get through this. We're trying to flatten that curve. Another phrase that nobody knew anything about a month ago. But trying to get control of this thing and not overwhelm our healthcare system. And hopefully this summer we'll be able to go out and enjoy aviation here in Alaska. So thanks for tuning in, folks. It's been nice to see people pop up here and there, and the occasional question. If I didn't cover something that you have some concerns about or questions about, you can leave a comment, especially on Facebook, and I'll be able to go back and check those, and I'll do my best to respond to those and leave you some more information. So my email address is on our website. My cell phone number, my personal cell phone number is there. So you're more than welcome to call me and send me an email. Just don't expect me to answer the phone after 10 o'clock or before 7 o'clock. I need a little bit of time with the family. So, but feel free to call and leave a message or send me an email, and I'll do my best to get you an answer. So with that, we'll say good night, and thanks for joining me, and we'll do it again here in the near future. Good night, everybody.